that's our speech drop code is the 3 whatever.
I assume that's a period, yeah. AD, that's a period.
That's a 0.
Oh.
Or it's an O, my bad.
So, okay.
Yeah, I'm not any type of video games. Maybe some Skyrim on a Switch on a plane, but not.
Someone said you always need to make it.
It's tough. Some video games.
I agree.
How are we doing the flip?
What's it you build for?
Alright.
Huh?
Alright. I don't know.
You can call
Pick
it.
a side. Head and tails.
Oh, affirmative tails.
Okay, so tails. Okay.
What, was that what you meant?
Serious.
Oh, my bad.
It's heads. Which side do you want?
Tails. I want ath.
Okay.
And who are you?
I am PH, so Daylon.
I was like in my head, I had a game plan saying,
And
pick
you're
heads,
affirmative.
I am affirmative, correct.
You mean neg?
Huh?
You said neg, right?
No, I'm ath.
You're Nick.
You're neg.
Also, that is a very dope shirt and tie, by the way.
Thank you. Vote for
I like
me.
the socks too.
Oh, thank you.
It's the second round. Let's see if we get compliments on the socks.
I told you I'm a sock person. Oh, we gotta stand right there.
Huh? Well, I guess. I don't know. I feel like it. That's why this speaker thing is here, but I don't really know.
Yeah. If you use the podium, it makes my life easier.
Okay, yeah, that's what I figured. I thought I'd be nice. Okay, I am ready. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Browsing through my case. Judges, are you ready? Awesome. Let's go ahead and start. The DoD warns of growing cyber threats. Cyber Command Director believes the human capital approach is a losing strategy, but SQ has been moving in the wrong direction. Reprover Roger 17. Cyber Command has something of a big data problem. The threats and levels of malicious activity we face in cyberspace are real and growing. The threats come from state and non-state actors who probe and scan the U.S. for vulnerabilities. China, Iran, North Korea, and especially Russia as state threats. Because if we're just going to take this largely human capital approach to doing business, that is a losing strategy. Plan: the Department of Homeland Security will use Cyber Command to implement machine learning intrusion detection systems with a general adversative network. For maritime transportation and provide training on how to operate and troubleshoot these systems. 3, machine learning is key to understanding, prevention, and protection from cyber attacks. Old methods are heavily dependent on cybersecurity professionals who find it difficult to keep up with growing cyber attacks. Fraley Kennedy 17 networks are constantly under attack. Most network protection devices logs and other traces of information regarding activities. Unfortunately, advanced attacks hide their footprints. In addition, far more challenging In addition, malware makes detecting far more challenging for professionals. New alerting methods must utilize technology, not labor. It will be technology that supports the labor workforce to understand and react to cyber threats. Machine learning offers promising results for dealing with security events. Machine learning intrusion detection systems applications are enhanced when operated under generative adversarial networks, as this network teaches ML IDS to operate under real-world attack scenarios. KD 2018. Researchers have developed a framework of the generative adversarial networks called IDS-GAN. This framework is proposed to produce adversarial attacks which can fully evade the intrusion detection algorithm or system. IDS-GAN produces malicious and bad traffic to attack the intrusion detection systems, to build and mimic attacks in IDS in the real world. The detection rates to the artificially produced have also reached 0, which is very impressive. This improvement will concentrate on the increase of the IDS robustness is our critical work. 5. Machine learning has shown to have a 90% success rate and can reduce the amount of time it takes to secure a network. Friendly Candidate 17. The model did perform these functions with a very high accuracy, 90%. Security analyst time could be reduced by 78%. 2,000 hours a day could be reduced to 455. 6. And cyber threats will only increase in the future. We need to adopt better technology to handle the volume of attacks. Friendly Candidate 17. The growing size of attacks presents both a threat and an opportunity. The rapid adoption of connected devices equipped with conventional security measures will render human security personnel incapable of defending the entire system. We'll use ML to act as a force multiplier. This leads us to our advantage. Maritime transportation. 1. Maritime transportation is at high risk of cyber attacks. Martin and Hobcraft 18. First, there are many different classes of vessels, all operate in very different environments. These vessels tend to have different computer systems built into them. In other words, many ships run outdated and unsupported operating systems, prone to cyber attacks. Second, users of these maritime computer systems are constantly in flux. Ship crews change at short notice, resulting in ship and crew members are often using systems they are unfamiliar with, increasing the potential for cybersecurity incidents relating to human error. Further, the maintenance of the onboard systems, including ship's navigations, is often contracted to a variety of third parties. A ship's crew has little understanding of how the onboard systems interact with each other. The third complexity is the linkage between onboard and terrestrial systems. Cybersecurity of the ship is also dependent on the cybersecurity of the land-based infrastructure. We see this in 2017 when a cyber attack on the systems of AP Moeller Musk resulted in cargo delays across the entire fleet. Second, machine learning helps protect critical infrastructure from cyber attacks. Ashby Fisher and Wentz Smith 17. Machine learning can enable adversary detection, attribution, and action prediction, and improve response in a way that will reduce the asymmetric advantage of attackers. Additionally, when it comes to monitoring security threats, utilizing automation and machine learning technologies is vital. Machine learning can reduce the total number of cyber attacks and reduce the time to remediation following a cyber attack. 3. Maritime transportation is key to global economy. White 15. Over 90% of international trade is based on sea transportation, so safety of shipping vessels is critical to global economy. Yet the low levels of cybersecurity awareness and training in this industry makes it an easy target for hackers. That's why we need to address this issue now with the plan. 4. This leads us to our impacts. Failure in maritime transportation would lead to a societal collapse, economic times 12. Without shipping, half of the world would starve and the other half would freeze. This is a major, major impact. We need to look at the serious consequences of these actions. With half of the world starving and the other half freezing, even that is crazy just to think about, like half of the world starving to death, because starving to death is one of the worst ways to die. It is so long, slow and drawn out, but so is freezing. Today you're going to be voting for affirmative based on magnitude and probability. This is a high risk situation with high magnitude results if you do not vote for the plan and put something in action. And that's the end of my speech. I'm open to cross-sects.
in your own words, can you tell me what the GAN is, or general?
Yeah, so basically the generative adversarial network, sorry, it like auto corrected it in the plain text.
Okay.
It acts as like a virus, and it goes at the machine learning algorithm until it breaches a hole, and then the machine learning algorithm knows that that's where it needs to fix an issue. So it fixes that issue, and then it runs the GAN again.
So this
and it
is
keeps
this,
hitting
so
it.
this is like a secondary response to hacking. So if I hacked it, then this IDS system comes into play.
So GAN acts as the hacker. It acts as it is a hacker attacking the firewalls and the cybersecurity system of the.
So how does this prevent ongoing attacks? So if it's hacking the system while a hacker hacks the system?
No. It is hacking before, so that it builds up the defenses. So when a hacker does come to attack, the defenses are already built, because it implements real life scenarios of how real hackers would hack the system.
And then this is pretty much exclusive for maritime transportations only. This is the only place that uses this.
What?
That uses the general admission network. Or
No.
is anybody using this type of technology already?
Yeah, it's already being used. That's where the solvency card comes from. But a lot of people are using IDS systems to help protect from
Like
like
who?
cyber attacks. It's used all across the critical infrastructure. That's also why I have the card in my maritime transportation, where it says that machine learning is it does prove to work. It's just not being used in maritime transportation. That's why I'm saying implementing it into maritime
So
transportation.
maritime is solely like
Shipping.
just shipping,
Pretty
so
much.
overseas.
Yeah.
So this doesn't affect like the airspace. So we could still deliver. If this happens, we could still deliver goods via train and airplane and
Can a
alternative
train go over water?
Well, I'm just saying. So
I mean,
but-
yeah,
or
you
a
can-
plane can. A plane can.
You can totally get a plane, but the amount of actual cargo planes that we have and the amount of fuel that cargo planes take is
But
not.
it's a possibility. So we have alternatives to, if we can't cross the land, we can go.
We
through
do
the
not have enough alternatives set in place currently.
Okay. And then lastly, it says that it'll provide training. So who's going to be provide the training for?
Your process is up,
Oh.
but it's the cybercom professionals.
All right. So I will start my prep time now. Shit.
Are you uploading anything?
Yeah. So let me just save this. Nah, I'm gonna just wing it, bro.
Hmm?
So I'm gonna just wing it. Okay, no cards. Let's see. Mackler. Let's see. All right, so just a brief roadmap. I'm gonna run a T increase. Then I'm gonna go to overstretch. So I'm gonna go onto his solvency. Okay, is everybody ready? Ready? All right. And go. Okay. T, increase actions. Interpretation. When AC must increase actions done by SciComm that are part of existing operational rules. Increase must be something that already exists. Buckley 16, attorney at law. The term increase should be construed to apply to increases of an already existing policy. 2. And Cyber Command is involved in defensive cyber operations. SciComm is in charge of protecting DoD networks. U.S. cybercoms defend the nation by identifying the adversary, blocking, attacking, and maneuvering to defeat them, defend the DoD information network, protect priority missions, and prepare cyber forces for combat, provide analytic and support. B, violation. The AF does not increase a simply create a new operation. 2, the AF is extra topical. They're trying to gain advantages from other non-resolutional mandates. My prerogative to 2 cards is best. 3, effect topical. They only gain topicality by passing on the plan because it creates an operation that can now be used as a justification for an increased action. Let's see. C, standards, predictability. The resolution is the only stable indicator of what the negative should be expected for a round begins. Keeping AF cases, the resolution is vital. There's already so many types of AFs under this resolution, allowing the AF to create. Not increase would make this topic unpredictable ground. Allowing the AF to claim all topic impacts was a negative severe disadvantage. It allows the AF a nearly infinite variety of impacts that it cannot reasonably be expected to research. Multiple action takes away net ground. This leaves a negative team at a disadvantage. You can vote them down on competitive equity. Limits. We need good limits to make sure we have an educational debate that only happens by limiting the debate to actions of increasing, not creating. D, voters. Rules of NFLD. Affirmative team must be voted down and found to be untopical, which is why you should reject reasonability. Allows for an untopical ask to evade the rules. 2, fairness in education. Not having fair ground and limits in the debate, it makes it unfair to be negative. We will always have a shallow debate. This kills education because they will never have positions to run against abusive teams. Overstretch. A, uniqueness. Right now, Cyber Command is focused on protecting its own infrastructure. The U.S. cannot afford an action. Parallel 18. The DoD said it would focus its cyber effects on China and Russia. The United States cannot afford an action. China and Russia are conducting persistent campaigns in cyberspace that pose long-term risk. China is eroding the U.S. ability to overmatch opponents. Russia is using cyber-enabled information operates to influence the U.S. population and challenge democratic processes. The DoD strategy comes on the heels of other major movements in cyberspace from the department. B, link. Cyber Command has limited resources. Plan forces a trade-off. Johnson 18. Rogers, caution lawmakers against stretching Cyber Command resources too thin. Where you ask why doesn't Cyber Command do this, the challenge for us is about prioritization within resources. C, eternal link. Risk of a serious attack on U.S. infrastructure is a growing threat. Lenda 18. U.S. intelligence chief warned that the threat was growing for a devastating cyber assault on critical U.S. infrastructure. Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea are launching daily cyber attacks on the computer networks of government agencies, U.S. corporations. Impact. Russian hackers can shut down multiple U.S. power plants and disrupt the power grid. Raffleson 18. Russian hackers attempted to infiltrate sectors of American infrastructure, including energy, nuclear, water. Russian actors have gained the ability to completely shut down power plants and other critical infrastructure in the U.S. It's obviously increasing in frequency. The DHS found a group that had broken into the core operation system of energy companies in the U.S. and Europe. Impact. Attacks on the power grid lead to unimaginable suffering and societal collapse. Bennett 16. Stores are closed, cell phone services failing, hospitals are on generators, rapidly running out of fuel, garbage is rotting in the streets, clean water is scarce, and escape there is none. This is the threat of an attack on the nation's power grid. In order to restore civilized society, the power has got to be back on. The most damaging kind of attack would be carefully coordinated to strike multiple power stations. While some areas could recover, others might be without power for weeks. Let's go on to their solvency. Machine learning is machine learning is not hack proof. It is too early to say if it'll be effective, and it is already being seen as an easy tool to manipulate. Smith 18. Machine smarts though are not always what they seem. Deep learning networks and other AI systems are finding out just how fragile their creations are by drilling down to see if the machines really know anything. Other students at MIT, colloquially known as Lab 6, demonstrated they could make a deep learning system, one trained to recognize objects from thousands of examples and to thinking of a picture of a skinnier was a dog PDF and a turtle was a rifle PDF. A December paper from the Google Brain team, the company's AI research continued to use a different approach to trick the system into classifying banana as a toaster. So here, Joe's the reason why we're going to negate the reason why to implement the GAN networks with IDS is that it's not a proven fact that they can't be hacked. Right now, he's saying that they do have the ability to implement algorithms that can hack themselves, but that doesn't say that they cannot be hacked from an outside an actor. Therefore, we have these deep learning network systems that can counteract other AI systems. Doesn't mean that it's not vulnerable to attacks. It's just another way for the firm to say that they might have a plan that could work, but necessarily doesn't guarantee anything. As well, too, when we outlay our impacts, if the energy sector was sacked, we wouldn't be able to ship anything. Nothing would go overseas, nothing would go over air, nothing would go over land. We wouldn't be able to place an order. So therefore, my impacts are going to outweigh his on the fact that we need to focus our shift on the U.S. power plants and not focus on the transportation sector, because the transportation sector is dependent on energy. And so without any energy or electricity, we couldn't be able to run anything or operate our systems to transportate. So therefore, if we do not have any power plants, we cannot live our daily lives in our regularity. We would not be able to see our families operate. We would not be able to take care of the sick. Therefore, in effect, if our power got cut off, the innocent lives of the American people and those around us would also be affected. Therefore, any cost of loss of life far outweighs the loss of transportation of goods. And for these reasons, you are going to be voting for the negative today. Thank you.
Give me 1 second.
One.
Oh, it's cross-X time. Oh. Okay, cool. Is going from a 0 to 100 increasing?
You could say that. Could be relative. So.
What else do I want to ask? Did you run a counter plan?
I did not.
Okay. Do my cards say that machine learning is hack proof? Is that like what my evidence is claiming at all?
No, but you're claiming that the 90% of it is far more superior in that it will prevent, your plan will prevent critical infrastructure from being hacked. So therefore, by implementing your plan, you aren't necessarily saying that it's almost impenetrable. So what's different than already having the network systems that we already have? What's different than yours? You don't answer that. It's a question. But
Okay. Can you go over your overstretch DA again for me? Like,
yeah.
Just explain why you chose to run an overstretch DA.
Pretty much because by you implementing this new network system, you're gonna have to train operatives to implement this. Therefore, I'm saying by doing that, you're gonna be stretching the already limited cyber commands because it's still within its infancy of conception. Therefore, they don't have the resources to implement a new machine learning algorithm because we don't have people to operate that system.
Oh, new. This is not a new machine learning algorithm.
Well, it's not currently in effect within
the marine. So new to maritime
Yes.
transportation. Okay.
New in that instance.
Okay. How many? Do you know how many people work in Cyber Command?
it could be 1,000. Doesn't mean that they don't need 1,001 to operate it. So they could have a bunch. Doesn't mean they have enough. But no, I don't know the statistic. How many?
Okay. How many people does it take to train a room of like 10 people on how to run run a system, like run a program?
It depends on the sophistication of the system. You know, if I'm trying to teach somebody how to type a computer on a keyboard, it might only take one. But if you're trying to train somebody on an operating system that has advanced algorithms, it might take a team. It might take a multitude.
Okay. A team of what are you projecting? 10. My cross section is done anyways. I'm gonna take running prep. Alright, I'm stopping prep. I'm uploading my document. Alright, it's uploaded. Okay, so roadmap. I'm gonna go off case in order, then on case in order. Pretty easy, because I like easy. Does that work for everybody?
Easy way spacious.
Yeah? Okay. Opponent, are you ready?
Yeah.
Yes. Judges, are you ready?
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah. Oh no, you're good. I wasn't looking, so that's my fault. I take it. Blah blah blah. Okay, so we can start now. Okay, so with the T, so the first thing on the T, no link with the topic. Their definition speaks to the interpretation of increase in the Fair Credit Reporting Act. The Supreme Court states, SCOTUS 2017, the Fair Credit Reporting Act requires notice to a consumer subject of adverse-based action in a credit report. Adverse action is a denial of an increase of any insurer. 2, the Supreme Court didn't buy their definition, neither should the judge. Increase can refer to creation. Their Supreme Court case says it best. The government construes increase to reach a first-time rate. The government gives an example of a gas station owner who charges more than the posted price for the gas consumer he doesn't like. It makes sense to say that the owner increases the price, even if the driver never pulled in there for gas before. The government's reading has the better fit. We therefore hold that the increase speaks to a disadvantageous rate even with no prior dealing. The term reaches initial rates for new applications. Counterinterp, increase includes creations. If I have 0 bananas and the neg gives me a banana, guess what? I just increased the amount of bananas I have. From 0 to 1. And I asked in cross-ex, is going from 0 to 100 increasing? And he said, yeah, you can say that. So increasing to become greater in size, amount, number, or intensity. On the violations, I meet the counterinterp, but even if you don't want to buy the counterinterp, guess what? We can go back to their T and read directly off of their T. The second card. U.S. Cyber Command defends the nation by identifying adversary activity. Is this not U.S. Cyber Command defending the nation, defending a critical infrastructure of the United States by identifying adversary activity? Like this, that's exactly what this is. So even if you don't want to buy my counterinterp, guess what? We still meet their interpretation too. Counter standards, predictability. My interpretation is more predictable because it aligns with how Supreme Court actually ruled in the negatives case and not just an earlier trial. It aligns better with the common understanding of the term. Ground, my definition provides more ground because it's not tied to a specific, specifically to programs which already exist. Thus allow the negative more arguments. For example, it can run disadvantages related to the staffing of new programs, kind of like how he did the overstretched DA. Real world, my definition is what actually was used in the Supreme Court definition, not an earlier trial once again. The neg cited. And so it meshes better with the way law understands and the term and way people use it in real world. And then burden of proof is my first point, or the fourth point. It is vital to checking forces of oppression, which will use in filmus of justifications to screw people over, like Bush on WMD in Iraq. Lowering the burden of proof empowers Bush and similar oppressors to kill us all. Yeah. All right. So we answered all these. Oh, so, yeah, and so there's no violations there. I didn't create something new. This is something that already exists. Cybersecurity or Cybercom is already tasked with protecting critical infrastructure. Therefore, I'm not extra or effects topical. I'm clearly 100% topical. Down to the disad. So what it really sounds like this disad about is Cyber Command being involved in another country or across seas or something, because like it literally says, well, first of all, the first card is miscut because it's saying that Cyber Command is focused on protecting its own infrastructure, but if you read the card, it's talking about the Department of Defense and the Pentagon, which is not Cyber Command as a whole. That's a general overstretch, and he's specifying it to Cyber Command, so that's miscut's card, so you can non-unique that card. That kind of drops out his little argument. But link, or the internal link right there, it says that risk of terrorist attack on U.S. infrastructure is a growing threat. Exactly. Critical infrastructure being transportation, maritime transportation, it's specifically. Therefore, we are solving for, like we can directly link to his impacts to solving for his impacts because we're helping protect these critical infrastructure that we need to protect. And once again, this really isn't an overstretch. The amount of officials that this would take, even if it took a team of 10 individuals, there are thousands of individuals that work under Cyber Command, and with the oversight of the Department of Homeland Security, it is not tasked only on Cyber Command. They're just using Cyber Command to implement this action. Therefore, we won't reach to any of the impacts that they claimed, how shut down U.S. power plants and such, because it's just like simply not going to happen. But you know what would be great is if we implement machine learning intrusion detection systems in maritime transportation, and then we hopped over to the electricity grid and we implemented it there too, because then maybe they wouldn't get hacked as much either. All right. And then, oh, and I do want to talk about Cyber Command having limited resources. Cyber Command, the DoD has the biggest budget out of any other department in the entire United States. They have a huge cut, and now that they don't have like a certain actor that leads their department, they have not specific oversight, so they can do a lot of things that wouldn't necessarily happen in other areas. So the fact that they're saying they have limited resources is just not true. You can disregard that card just based on the warrants. But when we talk about the solvency, you can cross-apply all my evidence. I have newer cards. You want to look at his cards. It's from the beginning of 2018. My machine learning cards are from the late 2018, as well as the late 2017 and late 2018, with showing that GAN actually helps improve machine learning. And we're not saying, bless you, and we're not saying that it's hack proof at all. We're just saying that it simply helps protect from some. Even if we only protect from one, we are still being beneficial in this round because we prevented one attack. That is net beneficial to the maritime transportation industry. And yes, so you're going to be voting on A because we're saving lives. And that's my time.
So use all my prep time. So generally same roadmap. Again, I'm gonna go over the solvency, impacts, and just close my Alright, so starting now. Okay, Judge, so for several reasons, this is why you're going to be voting for the negative side. Beginning with their plan isn't unique here. In cross-checks, I asked him if machine learning is unhackable, he says no. So therefore, there's nothing any different than the already implemented IDS systems. By adding a new algorithm that hacks itself, it doesn't necessarily prevent hacks from happening. It just identifies it and reassesses that. So therefore, hacks are still capable. Therefore, the critical infrastructure in which he's trying to protect and prevent from happening is still vulnerable. Let's see. Then, therefore, he also drops the fact that he doesn't say impact calculus is my impact still outweigh his. Let's say that the systems are still dependent on the actual the energy sector. So therefore, if our sector gets hacked, his transportation wouldn't even be possible. So therefore, even if we do lose on the T, Judge, you're going to vote for us on the impact calculus. The fact that my impacts far outweigh his because his plan doesn't necessarily solve for anything. It just implements what's already existing. So if he's not increasing or if he's not adding a new system, he's just pretty much just saying that, hey, IDS is there. Let's add another system to this IDS and say, hey, it should work. But hey, that doesn't mean that non-state actors out there doesn't have up-to-date information that says, hey, we can hack this information too. We have AI, we have access to IDS systems that's already been implemented. And two, he gives a lot of theoretical arguments saying that, hey, the DoD has the largest budget. Give me some evidence that says that their budget's the largest. Give me some evidence that says that they do have enough resources or they do have enough people to operate this new system. So if not, then I can pretty much say that, oh yeah, the DoD's budget just shrunk today. They have the smallest budget. You know, I'm allowed to say that too. If I don't have any evidence, he doesn't have any evidence too. So you might as well just throw that argument out there and still look at the overstretched impact is that they don't have the resources to do what they want to do. It sounds good on paper, but they don't have the resources or they don't even have a head of the department to say that, hey, we have this operator in charge of this. He doesn't even know how it'll be implemented. They're just saying it works or it could work a little bit better, but it's not going to prevent anything from what already has happened. Hacking will still be prominent. Therefore, if we do look at the impacts, we have to vote on the negative today because the impacts for the lives of the energy sector, we need power. We need power to run the water sectors. We need power to run every other critical infrastructure that's operating here on the U.S. Let's see. And then also, too, he wants to go talking about my cards and the dates that they were conceived. If the dates really matter, history wouldn't be a thing. We need to look in the back to know how we can assess the future. So it doesn't matter if my cards from 2002, it happened. So the fact that it happened then means that it's more prominent to happen now. And that was the whole point of having cards from the past that shows that, hey, within the last 20 years, this shit's been going on. So nowadays, in 2019, we still need to say that hacking is more prominent, it's more existent, and the fact that the permanence plan doesn't solve for anything, it just gives another idea to say, hey, it's a spin-off of IDS, it's a GAN system. There we go, it hacks itself. It doesn't protect us in any way. So again, Judge, if you're not gonna vote for us on T, at least look at the impact calculus. In no way does he say how his impacts outweigh ours. Therefore, on that reason alone, if we lose the energy sector, we wouldn't be allowed to have a debate. We wouldn't be allowed to transport anything. We pretty much wouldn't be able to exist. We'd go back to our primordial times, like cavemen, learning how to operate with fire. We'd be starting from ground zero. So therefore, if we go for the negative side today, we need to shift Cyber Command's responsibilities to protection in the energy sector, not the transportation sector. For these reasons, again, on impact calculus alone, you will vote on the negative side today. Thank you.
I'll take the rest of my prep.
Can I have some?
With my prep? You need it? You're done.
I know.
Okay. So order. I'm gonna address the T real quick, then go on case in order, and then his last off case argument. Does that work for everybody? Yes. Ready?
Yeah.
Judges, are you ready? Awesome. I looked at you this time, if you noticed. Let's go ahead and start now. Okay, with the T, he dropped the T. He didn't have anything against any of my arguments, so we're obviously not voting on T today. You can go ahead and throw that paper away. We're going to move to topic case. He said non-unique because we're not actually solving for anything. Are you serious? You need to look at all the cards if you want to believe his argument first before you actually think about that, because it specifically says that machine learning helps with protection and time, like the reducing the time of remediation after an attack. So regardless of whether the hackers actually got through the machine learning or not, it also helps the time of remediation after an attack. It specifically says that in actually a couple cards. If you look at the link story on my advantage, it says it clearly right there, and it also says it up in the solvency as well. But regardless, his really huge point here was the fact that machine learning is not hack proof. Nowhere at all did the affirmative say that it is hack proof. We specifically said the accuracy is only 90%. So obviously there's a 10% error right here, but regardless, 90% is a huge chunk that we're able to solve for because we have clear-sighted, carded evidence that shows that it is successful, that it has a success rate. Yeah, guess what? Everything's not 100% in this world. We're never gonna get everything perfect. But this is pretty darn close, so you have no reason to vote this down. We have clear, like 90% is a huge chunk. So really what we're weighing out today is the probability and the magnitude of these disadvantage and the advantage. You're going to be voting for the affirmative today because the probability and magnitude win on the advantage side. So this being said, and I will show you how, if you look down onto my advantage, card 3, maritime transportation is key to global economy, 90% of international trade. So if we don't pass plan, these impacts are going to be felt worldwide. While if a shutdown of the power grid in the United States only affects people in the United States. So yeah, it may be horrible that people would suffer in the United States, but if you don't pass the affirmatives plan, millions of people, billions, actually billions, half of the world is what, 3.5 billion? The other half is 3.5 billion. So what? That's almost 7 billion because I believe it claims all. But regardless, this is worldwide magnitude that we are talking about here. So you have to vote affirmative in this case because of the large scale magnitude that this is, but also the fact of the probability. Like, are we seriously going to have power grid failures because of 5 people teaching maritime transportation how to use machine learning? No, we're not. You can just use common sense to think about that. But yeah, so today you're voting for affirmative. And that's the end of my speech. Good job. Thanks. You did good too.
I was like, what the fuck?
You should have ran escalation.
That's what I'm saying. I didn't. I was asking if I was gonna get him. Like, oh, I don't know what to do. I was like, well, that's why he won. I need some. That's cool because I never heard of maritime transportation. That sucks. Imagine that shit. Like that submarine, bro.
Submarine.
We
It's
gotta-
the water. You had the right area when you were like aviation, and I was like, oh, what are you gonna say about that?
I
Like,
did.
this
That's
is
what I'm
really
saying.
good. So I was like,
What
it's
a
okay.
counter to that.
It's okay, we're chilling.
It's plan.
Do you guys want us to leave?
Oh,
So you
So just to be clear, the affirmative is DH and the negative is BS.
you're
correct.
correct.
so whoever wins, you can put BS on it.
No, don't say that.
So are the judges ready?
Yeah, I submitted mine already.
Okay,
so
yeah, I
it's
think
not-
that was the last one.
Yeah.
Okay, so congratulations to both of you. It's 2-1 for the affirmative. I sat out, so I guess I'll go first. A couple things both of you need to work on is organization. Y'all are just all over the place. Negative, especially for you, especially in your last speech, which I think is probably the reason that you end up losing, is that you're going to case, back to disadd, back to case, back to disadd. The problem that I had fundamentally is 2 things. You're the only one that offers this analysis that without the electric grid means that it would also impact the affirmative, so it's turning the affirmative. Now, I'm not exactly sure why that's the case, but it doesn't get responded to. And then for you, in your 1AR, you don't really address the advantage all that much. You talk about the solvency. So when you get back up, you extend the advantage, but I'm not sure exactly how the advantage and the disadd interact with each other. So when you don't read any evidence against the disadvantage, the risk of the disadvantage for me outweighs. A couple things that I would tell both of you. So first with the affirmative, start with your I meet on T. You start with the indictment of the interpretation, which I mean is fine. Like what the arguments you're making are fine, but in terms of organizationally, you make your meet at the bottom after the counter interpretation. So in terms of when I'm flowing it and everything, it can be a little confusing about what you're meeting.
Okay.
And so just put that first. Go, I meet. If you're not buying my meat, it's still a bad interpretation. Here's why. Then go to your counter interpretation.
Okay.
And then, yeah, in terms of negative, you just need to do more. Make more arguments. You need to address the advantage. The other thing that I would say is you're missing the opportunity to explain why your argument about the act still happened is important. One of the problems with affirmatives, and not just this one, would be, so how do you solve, right? So there's still this 10% chance that the affirmative impacts will occur. He's admitting that. So then it becomes a question of, if you believe there's a risk of the disad, and I've mitigated the affirmative, that the impacts could still happen with the affirmative, this would be a reason to vote for me.
Okay.
And my guess would be that it's your organization that is the reason that you lose this round, is that I just happen to be a judge that looks at risk of the disadvantage versus the risk. Both of you need to work on extending specific cards. You're talking very generally about your arguments. Go through, like for you, go through and extend your evidence. And you are just absolutely letting him get away with this idea that there are only going to be 5 people that are going to be involved with this. Your link card is basically talking about distraction and taking focus and things like that. He links, right? The other thing is, this would be a reason that you might might keep run like a substantial T or whatever, because his answers are screaming not substantial. I'm only 5 people. I'm only 5 people. And so you want to kind of guard against that. Having said that, I mean, in this round, I think that's a great answer, is to say, yeah, I'm only 5 people. So what are the chances that's going to happen? But for me, extend your advantage in the 1AR, talk about it more, address his impact calculus, address why. I mean, you do this in the last speech, but you let this sit around as to why the energy grid would not lead to the same thing. And both of you, at the end of the day, you're talking about the whole world. I don't know how you get to the whole world when it seems like you're only dealing with the U.S. I don't know. So it's like your argument about how he is only dealing with the United States, I don't know why that argument doesn't apply to you as well. So just a little more detail on all your arguments, worn out your arguments a little more. I'm not saying it's a bad argument, it's just to explain it more in the round.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good job.
Alright, so I think something that Dr. Doggett?
Yeah.
Dr. Doggett was saying was, and it kind of comes into the organization thing, is when the neg doesn't really respond to your advantage at all, you need to extend all that cross, because maybe it's because I saw your after the second time, and I mean, I do remember you saying, like, in your first speech that this is going to affect, half the people are going to starve and the other half are going to freeze to death. Like, I very specifically had to flow remember that, but so maybe I'm giving you the benefit of the doubt there, talking about like magnitude of impacts, but something that has already been touched upon is, yeah, you need to extend your whole advantage. Like, you need to, like, you didn't, I guess maybe you did extend it a little bit, but you need to do a better job of going line by line and extending like why this happens. Like, you basically get like 100% of this.
Okay.
Because the only thing they talk about is your solvency, but if you have the cards to back up your solvency, then yeah. And another thing too is I would advise not repeating the 90% success rate, which has already been talked about, because like if the neg brings that up and like you don't do enough to talk about or do enough to like counter the neg's disadvantage, then you could easily lose there.
Okay.
But so I basically voted because I voted AF because again, like I already said, I do think the impacts outweigh. And then while you had a small amount of ink on the disad, the neg had no ink on the advantage, and so I think that's where you could have won the debate, because you hit the solvency, but then like he's just gonna obviously get up and say his cards. I think if you would have hammered down like talking about your link more, your link scenario, if like you would have went through that more, like it's distraction. Like you went for that argument, I think you could win the debate. But again, organization was the thing too. In your first constructive speech, the net constructive, like I wrote down the feedback. I was like, "Are you running a counter plan?" And then because I didn't, it kind of came off that way, but then you didn't. So I watch out for stuff like that.
Okay.
And I also have the same comments on the T, like organization. You need to start the T with. So you either need to say, I meet their definition or their definition is so bad that
Okay.
it's like the worst thing. Like if their definition is like, I don't know, sexist or racist or something, that's,
Okay.
you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
that's the when you would not want to meet it. But other than that, you want to start with I mean.
A lot of the same feedback. For me, talking about the impacts and like the impact calculus between the two cases, I have coming out from both of you, it's societal collapse, right? So tell me which society will collapse more, I guess. You just need to do a clear impact weighing of society's gonna collapse on the affirmative, but society's gonna collapse on the negation. I don't know which one's worse though, because I just have a very generic, like, holistic, the world's gonna end. For me, what it came down to was like kind of what Andrew was saying, like actually responding to the advantage or disadvantage. I didn't really hear anything on the advantage, and he came back and responded to the solvency articulation. So that means the affirmative case basically went all the way through. What I have on the disadvantage, however, is like a little bit one line with no evidence saying, yeah, by the way, my plan solves the disadvantage too. So like when it comes down to that, I'm like, well, there's no response, there's no like articulation as to why the affirmative plan will not solve that VA, and that goes dropped and conceded throughout the round, coming out of like the 1AR. So it comes down to which world do I think is going to be better, and the affirmatives told me, even without evidence, that their world's going to be better without any real context to it. And that's why I ended up voting for the affirmative.
Awesome. Thanks.
Cool. Thank you guys.